it's something that's going to happen to 100% of us, period, full stop. And you never know when it's going to happen. And the number one reason people don't plan is because they're just going to do it later. Well, none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know when it's going to happen. So do your family and loved ones a solid and put a plan together for them.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. So welcome to Death on the Daily, and I am joined today by Tripp and Jessica Tillery, who are husband and wife co-founders of the Deadbook. Both are seasoned business leaders who founded their business from the heart after the unexpected loss of Tripp's mum, Susan. And Tripp, who is an only child, found himself as the sole executor of her estate in his early 30s. But thanks to his mum's foresight and love, his journey was made much less confusing and complicated by the Deadbook that she'd prepared and left for him. When I trained as a death doula, I learned that preparing for our deaths and communicating our wishes is such a gift that we can leave for our family. It's a process that can feel very daunting and confusing at the start, but it's actually incredibly empowering. And having received my Deadbook, it's beautiful to have a product that actually walks you through this process with such compassion and love. So I'm so excited today to be sitting in conversation with Tripp and Jessica as we explore both the emotional as well as the practical side of loss and how we can prepare for our own eventual ending. So welcome, Tripp and Jessica.
Thank you. We're so excited to just have this conversation and speak with you.
Yeah, thank you for having us. We're very excited.
So firstly, let's root into your Death on the Daily story. So wherever you want to take us in the story of you as well as your mum, Susan, Tripp, please just let's root into it.
Okay, yeah. My mother and I were always very close throughout my entire life, even more so after my parents divorced when I was 14 or 15 years old. I chose at that point to live with her. And, you know, much as she was for my entire life, she was really my mentor, my rock. And, you know, that relationship developed into, you know, more of a friendship and a best friend as I, you know, graduated university and then, you know, grew into my career. But yeah, my mother and I were always incredibly close. And, you know, that relationship evolved to include Jessica. After her and I began our relationship and got married, she viewed Jessica as the adopted daughter that she never had. She was always just a light in the world. She could light up any room that she walked into with her energy and her laugh. She always looked out for other people, even down to, you know, we'd go to dinner and she'd be best friends with the waiter or waitress by the end of the meal. She just wanted to know everything about them and what motivated them and what drove them. She was just really, truly the best parent I could have ever asked for. But even outside of that, she looked out for other people in a way that's exceedingly rare in the world these days. And she was just a special, special person. So Jessica and I took a trip that was quite frankly much needed, and we were out of cell service. When we returned home, I got a couple of calls from my aunt and cousin saying they could not get a hold of my mother. My mother's nature and always looking out for her people and being available, she answered the phone. She always answered the phone. So I gave her a call. She didn't answer. And her and I always had this understanding where if I called and she didn't answer, she was busy. If I called twice within a matter of 5 or 10 minutes, you know, barring being under anesthesia, she picked up the phone. I called her that second time and she didn't answer. And I just kind of got this pit in my stomach. I called my boss and I was like, hey, I got to go. And I drove up to her house and wound up having to break in, but I found her dead in her kitchen. And you know, I called 911 and I called Jessica, and then just my life shattered around me. The next 2, 3, 4 hours, 2 weeks, 2 months are just honestly kind of a blur. And when people say when they lose a loved one suddenly like that, or just lose a loved one in general, that their world kind of collapses around them. I mean, it really, really, truly did. I remember driving home, Jessica came and got me. And I remember driving home, and it was in Atlanta rush hour, so everyone's out on the highways and roads and everything, and just looking out the window and thinking, why is everyone going about their daily life like my mom just died? And it was such a disconnect between where I was and, the rest of the world kept moving. I felt like I was on a different planet, honestly. Before we left, the police and everybody did their thing and came out and asked us if we needed anything out of the house. And I had the wherewithal to look at Jessica and say, I need you to go up to her office. I need you to go in this drawer, and I just need you to get this black binder out and put it in the car. The origin of the black binder and the Deadbook as a whole is rooted in my mother's own experience with the loss of her mother and being the executor of her estate. And that happened about 10 years or so ago. And my mother asked me to come to the house. She said, I need to show you something. And she plopped this book down and said, this is my dead book. If anything ever happens to me as an only child, you'll be the executor of my estate. And this has everything you need. And, as a child, I'm like, what's going on? Do you have something to tell me? This is a weird conversation to be having. But it was really born out of her own experience, the foresight she had as a planner, and the love of a mother.
And I think I'll just add on to that. I mean, being a spouse in a situation like that, there is no right answer. There's no wrong answer. Like, you're trying to grieve, but you're also trying to protect and take care of, your partner or your kids or whoever it is, as they're also going through the process, probably more so than you are. And I just remember showing up to the house, and all Tripp could do was just collapse into my arm. It's one of those things that, like, I still just don't have the words for, other than I feel like Susan gave me the strength to help him through it, because I honestly some days don't know how I got out of bed, but I knew I had to, because I had to be strong through the process and help him move some pieces forward and just make sure that we were eating eventually. So that's a whole conversation we can get into, or even another time. But like, being a partner or spouse or somebody who is not, the direct child of a parent, but you're still supporting that person, is really tough.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, both of you. And obviously, I'm so sorry for your loss, and for such a sudden and unexpected loss as well, and for everything that you went through.
Thank you.
And I think what really hit me there was, both of your experiences, and obviously our experiences in grief are so unique to each of us and to the situation. And then obviously, as you've navigated this together. So Jessica, I think that's a really important point around when you are the spouse, supporting your husband, and actually then also grieving yourself. And what a beautiful reflection of Susan's legacy and that spirit that went channeled through you, as well as obviously with your mum Tripp's her dead book, and based upon her experience, and that seed that has been obviously planted and now has sprouted through your own business as well. So I'd love to, I think as we continue journeying through this conversation, I think we're going to keep circling back into the different sides of grief and the emotional side of it, as well as obviously the practical side. But this feels like a beautiful place as well to introduce the dead book and this beautiful path of purpose that you're walking, that has sprouted through obviously a profound moment of pain and grief that you've navigated. So Tell me a little bit more around how that seed from this experience then sprouted.
I was catatonic for a few days.
A few months.
Yeah, a few months, but probably 2 or 3 days I was able to kind of get out of bed and shuffle around the house. And Jessica and I were sitting at our kitchen island, in the fog of war, just trying to figure out what to do next. And we had some immediate things that I knew we had to do, but I looked at Jessica and I said, "Hey, will you go grab the binder that I asked you to get out of the house, my mom's Deadbook, and let's just go through it and see what's in there and see if it, gives us any sort of guidance on how to move forward and what we need to do." And lo and behold, we open it and it was just piece by piece, organized by, these are going to be your critical first steps, the things you need to address immediately. Do this, do that. It had her wishes for her memorial service, and just some immediate things to take care of. Cancel credit cards. This is where my assets and liabilities are. Contact these people. And in the midst of that grief and that emotional just inundation of immediately after losing someone suddenly and unexpectedly that you talked to 3 days prior, it provided such peace, because as an executor, a lot of people that are identified as an executor have never been through that process before. And, your world, the foundation of your world, and, quite frankly, the lens you view the world through and things as you understand them has been yanked out from under you. And it just feels like things don't make sense anymore. But even then, as an executor, you're expected to immediately start making decisions that
big decisions
that more or less are business decisions. And having a framework and a guide of this is what you can expect and this is what you need to do just provided such comfort to me and to Jessica as well, kind of in that immediate aftermath. So I think a few months had passed, and we were really kind of in the flow of administering her estate, the business side of it. And we were sitting at the island again. That was kind of our headquarters in our kitchen. Mm-hmm. And Jessica looks at me after a few conversations we've had with family and friends who were asking about the book, and says, "This could be really useful to a lot of people. We should think about developing this into a product that we can sell to help people plan, and to give people the peace that we also felt from receiving the Deadbook from my mother."
Yeah. And so, just to add light to that, we had never been through this. And some of our learnings, were very much those moments of like, how do people do this without a Deadbook? And as Tripp had shared, we had so many friends and family, just the question kept coming up, how are you dealing with the estate? First, how are you? But secondly, how is the process of dealing with the estate? And a lot of those questions came from, my parents or his aunts and uncles, people who had been through it before and had seen how messy and unorganized it could be. And I think they were all shocked in our response when we were like, yeah, it's work, but it's pretty straightforward. And they started wanting to know, like, well, why is it so straightforward? And we would share the Deadbook. And in our heads, we're young. We were like, everybody has a Deadbook, right? And it's like, no, nobody has this. Not at all. And so, just to share how it helped us, she had not only included her funeral wishes and contact information, but every single password to every single account, every single bank account, and what that bank account did. Where's the mortgage? Where's car payment? Are there any other bank accounts we should know about? What about life insurance? And then also items to bequeath. And this part was kind of, I don't want to say fun, because I don't think fun's the right word when you're administering an estate, but just being who Susan was, she left little like jokes throughout her dead book. I highly encourage that for anybody who is writing, an estate plan. So like items to bequeath, my ring goes to Jessica, this piece of jewelry goes to my sister, or like there's this little monkey stand, like the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. She probably got it from like a consignment market. Tripp was obsessed with this monkey stand. So she had this note. She was like, Tripp, you can finally have the monkey stand. Like, and it was just simple things like that, that having all this information, one of the biggest things that we learned is like companies will not speak to you unless you're the executive of the state, rightfully so. It makes sense as to why. But with Tripp's permission, I was able to get in and like update the credit card on the phone bill, or help organize who gets what, or even just help him plan the funeral, doing things like that while he needed the space to be in bed and grieve, or go outside and go for a walk. I was able to help him in ways that without this book would not be able to help him. So, to sum that all up, I think the idea, one, came from just people asking about it, but two, being young and realizing that, we've always been taught you have to have a will or you have to have a trust. A lot of people still don't have that because you don't legally have to have one of those, but it is very important to have the legal piece of it. I encourage everybody who, if you don't have a will or a trust, to 100% get one. But for us, it was such a moment of like, hold on, wait a minute. Like, that's one piece of the puzzle. There is so many other things that you need to know. And I think, we have always been taught that like, oh, if you have a will, you're good. No, like that handles the government side of things. So,
yeah, it's because death is so seldom spoken about and thought about. I think one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is, we have plans like when people give birth, they have a birth plan, or, there's so many, or when you plan for a wedding, it's meticulously prepared for. Yet death, which is going to happen to 100% of all of us, is so underprepared for. Yeah. And that blows my mind now. And I will be open and honest and say, until I did my end of life doula training, I didn't even think about the fact that I need a will. You don't even think that actually, death could come at any time for any of us, or this is really gonna out the terrible. I think it was a film that I saw, the Sex and the City one, where Big dies, or is that in the show? Anyways, the new series, yeah. And it's kind of, I used to love the original Sex and the City, and I still watch it, but I don't know. I'm not sure. Not sure it's as good as it used to be. But I remember when Big died, how Carrie couldn't get into his laptop, and she was trying with that password. And if you don't have that information, then it's only going to add extra stress and pressure. And again, on the passwords thing, watching that made me suddenly go, oh my goodness, I don't, I like my partner Jordan, I think he'd probably know a few things to get into, but he wouldn't know half of what banks. Yeah, all of the details, and equally to the point around it doesn't stop with the will. There's more steps that you can take that can just make it that real gift to your loved ones. And I absolutely love the personality side of it as well. How beautiful to be able to leave those messages and just make it into that. If you have a sense of humor, or you wanted to throw all of your love into everything that you input into your dead book. I just think that's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And how wonderful now that this is obviously offered out so that others can walk through all of that detail that your mum left for you, Tripp. I think it's absolutely incredible.
And I think you hit the nail on the head too. It's like we plan for travel, we plan for weddings down to the minute, down to like what time is reservation, or like what color are the flowers for the wedding. And when it comes to the dead book or estate planning in general, everybody's estate plan is going to look different, just like weddings look different, just like travel looks different. Like they're not meant to be cookie cutter plans. And so that's why when we were creating the product, we were like, we will provide the framework of what's needed, but like there are sections where it's a little more like free for all, if you will. Like, add some color to it, add your personality into it. We can't be a guide to a point where it like is so cookie cutter that your plan just falls into like
you're boxed into doing something you maybe don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, my mother, her entire life joked that she wanted a Viking funeral. She wanted us to push her body to sea in a wooden boat and shoot flaming arrows at it and have a keg on the beach and have a party.
Wow.
So it didn't make it into the official document.
I think it's legal.
Yeah. It's definitely, well, she said she'd give me enough money to bail me out of jail, but didn't make it into the book, but bring some color to it, do your own thing, make it your own. I mean, it's, to your point, it's something that's going to happen to 100% of us, period, full stop. And you never know when it's going to happen. And the number one reason people don't plan is because they're just going to do it later. Well, none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know when it's going to happen. So do your family and loved ones a solid and put a plan together for them.
And it's okay if that plan changes over the years. It's meant to. Like right now, Tripp tells me if he passes away, he wants me to throw a party on top of a ski mountain. Sounds fun. I love that. I'm sure in 20 years from now, he may have a different wish. So it's okay if your plan changes.
It'll be the same.
Party on top of the ski mountain, no matter what. And I love that as well with that, because it is, we morph, we evolve. Some things will stay the same. Other things will shift and evolve. And actually the joy that I could really feel in your energy as you were sharing your mum's, the wishes that she said that didn't make it into the Deadbook. I mean, that's absolutely hilarious. I can really feel your mum's humor just shining on through. And then obviously, with your wishes, Tripp, like there is real. So this is going to might sound strange to anyone who's listening who sort of is thinking about this going, oh my goodness, this feels like a mountain to climb. How on earth can I start to contemplate my death? But actually so I first went through the process when I studied to be an end-of-life doula. I'm going to go through the process and I'm actually going to record it for a video for my YouTube channel of me doing the Deadbook now as well. And maybe my plans will have evolved. But I remember in training, myself and my fellow doulas all went, oh no. And we were trying to avoid that session. We all kind of came to that week a little bit sheepish and a bit, ooh, I don't know how this is going to be. Is it going to be awkward? And we loved it. I remember the energy in the room after we all got completely creative with, what are our wishes for our funeral? How can we be as creative as possible and give our families really big jobs of making it happen? And that's okay. But also, it really does what resonates with me, and having been through deaths in my family and then, witnessed around me in my friendship groups, takes the pressure off, because there's also often a conversation of what they want, or perhaps some disagreements, or perhaps some friends who you don't even know about that actually they would really love to be there. So as well, I think it's such an important piece that we can do that was also curiously uplifting and empowering in my own experience. It's really not as scary as it sounds, contemplating your own death.
Yeah. And I think, I've had this conversation a lot recently, just with others who are in the space, or, even customers or people who have asked about the Deadbook. I think traditionally we think of funerals as you go to a church and you have an in-ground burial. And I truly feel like the younger generations are shaking that up. We're calling them celebrations of life. We're calling them memorials. We are like, let's throw a party. Let's have it at a wine bar. Let's have it at an art gallery. And I think it's so important that whatever it is you decide to do for yourself, it reflects who you are and what was important to you. And that could be a church body, and that could be a traditional burial. But I think for the first time, we're seeing that funerals can be something that are so like bright and airy, and they don't have to be heavy and dark. They can really truly celebrate who the person was.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And actually, because it being that true expression of you, and this came up on a recent episode with a fellow death doula called Tree Carr, And she mentioned how in planning for her own death, it really spotlighted what is most important for her now. So she suddenly looked at it and went, oh, there's loads of nature in this. I need to get out in nature more and make sure that I'm prioritizing that. So as well, I think it's a really beautiful exercise. And that's really, for me, what death can teach us, and being with death and all of our impermanence is, okay, now I know, this process, now I know what is most important to me. So actually, is there elements of this and what I would have at that celebration of me that I also need to make sure that I'm getting out there and doing, going to the top of that mountain and having a party.
Exactly. Death, aside from not viewing it as, this morose, sad thing that we generally do, right? There's a beautiful part of death that can really kind of solidify or, bring to the forefront what we really find important in life. It kind of breaks down all of those societal constructions, if you want to call them that we kind of move through every day as we're just kind of, going through our routine, and kind of really lays bare the world, and it helps you refocus and focus on things that are important. Jessica, our dog, family, friends, what you want to put your energy and time into, what is your legacy going to be? And, quite frankly, facing our own mortality is scary, which is why I think a lot of people don't plan, and why they procrastinate in putting this end of life plan together, because they have to face their own mortality in doing so. However, I think it can be incredibly empowering to do it.
Oh, I couldn't agree more too. And I wanted to ask, sort of bouncing off of that point as well, for you both, is how your mum's passing, Tripp, and obviously for you as well, Jessica, how, what did that really crystallize in you of, because I often find, for me, I look at it like it's like a lightning bolt whenever I've been through a big bereavement, and it just lights up the earth just for that second.
Yeah.
To make me see what's most important. And actually, when I work with people, I see that then there's that choice, and it's not any judgment on anyone who got those messages of this is what's most important, and then business as usual crept in, because I understand, we all sort of exist in this world, and we have to go back to work, etc. But yeah, tell me what were lightning bolts that came through of meaning and understanding in what is a really tragic circumstance.
It shook me to my core when she passed. And I think it was one of those moments of like, my parents are going to pass too. So that was one of my first learnings, is like, when my mom calls me, pick up the phone. Or when, my dad's like, hey, I haven't seen you, because I don't live near my parents. When he's like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while, just take the time to go visit, because life is short, and having those moments with them is really special to me now. I think even bigger, removing my parents from it, even like my siblings and my friends, like really cherishing the time that we do have together. A lot of my friends have families now, and we don't get to see each other like we used to. And it's beautiful watching them become moms and dads. But it's like, when we do have that hour once a month together, let's just dig in and have fun, and really like cherish being around each other and creating memories. I think, to really sum it up, what it changed my life in a lot of ways. But it really is like the little moments, like having a purpose-driven life. And that's when Tripp and I were like, we want to do the Deadbook because it is purpose-driven. We're helping others. It's like, I love my job. I love careers. I love working, but it's like, can I do something that at the end of the day, we're going for a walk and I'm like beaming, talking about it, versus like, quite frankly, stressfully just like laying things on Tripp about like, oh, why did they say this? Why didn't they do this? Like, that's not worth it. And I would say the other thing too is travel. Like, we're big travelers, and I don't think that like having a death experience should make everyone say like, I'm going to see the world, because that's not everybody's personality type or what they want from life. But it used to be like, with social media, it's like we see Greece on somebody's Instagram page and we're like, oh, we want to go see Greece. But now it's like we travel to really immerse ourselves in the culture and to like learn what other people live like and what they believe. And it really opens up our mindset as well as to like, what do we want out of life? Because we now realize how short life is. It's no longer about traveling to take the pictures. It's really to travel to have the conversation. So,
Yeah. My mother was a few days shy of her 63rd birthday. She just retired a few years previously, unfortunately during COVID, because I got my travel bug from her. She introduced traveling to me very early in life as a way to see the world and, explore who we are as humanity and different mindsets and all of those things. And it was a thing that her and I did together. And, after Jessica and I got married, Jessica would join in on these trips. But she retired during COVID and unfortunately didn't get to travel a ton. She was otherwise healthy, religious about getting her physicals, and then just one day she's not with us anymore. And that put things in perspective of nothing's ever guaranteed. I feel as people, we feel that we're guaranteed or we're owed 75, 80, 85 years on this earth. And the truth is that's not it. And in that light, I think I have realized, a few things that I mentioned before of I have a finite amount of energy to give. I have a finite amount of time. And the finite amount of time that I think I have I may not even have that much, right? So I'm very diligent about who and what I give my time and energy to. To Jessica's point, it's easy to see things, not only places that you want to travel to, but experiences that you want to have, whether it be a restaurant or skydiving or I don't know, whatever it may be, a new hobby, skiing or mountain biking or whatever it is that, all too often we just kind of put on the top shelf and we say, okay, one day I'm going to do that, right? Just do it. Go do it. Explore the world, explore hobbies, explore things that you want to do, read the book, take the trip, and be sure that the people and things that you're giving your time and energy to are giving that time and energy back, because you just never know when it's going to be your time. Mm-hmm. And all of that to say that I've thought a lot about legacy since my mother passed away, and seeing the beautiful legacy that she left behind, through all the people that came to her memorial and all of the stories that were told that, quite frankly, I didn't even know some of. Seeing that beautiful legacy that she left behind, the mark that she left on the world, really, really touched me and left an enormous impact on me. So legacy and what we leave behind while we're here is very important to me now.
Oh, that is so profound, that legacy. And I think that's so beautiful because as we look at your mum's legacy and how that's inspiring your legacy, I just think it's so powerful as well that when we get those lightning bolt moments of purpose, to follow those and to take action on it. But equally, as you both shared, really rooting into that which is most important. And some of that is really simple stuff, that beauty of connection and those who we love, and prioritizing where our energy goes. It made me think about, I will not name the company, but one place that I worked in my 14-year career, there was a PA there, and I was rushing about, and it was just before a shoot, and I was stressing. And she just said to me, if you die because of the stress, they're only going to send flowers to your funeral. That's it.
Yep.
And I was like, oh,
Yep.
At the time, because I hadn't really thought about, that was when I was definitely in my death avoidant phase of
Yeah.
life. But it sort of hit me, and then I thought about it, and it still sits with me, but that really made me get perspective on a day when literally, my adrenaline was pumping, my heart rate was up, to just be like, actually, this isn't what's most important, and it's definitely not important enough to put my health at risk here. So I think that's really profound around, actually, where is your energy going, and is there reciprocity, and are you is there that care, and are you being looked after, etc. I think that's really, really beautiful.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up the work thing, and without going into it, that was a big awakening of like, you put so much time and energy and effort into your career, and you think these people have your back, and then you go through something like this, and that's not always the case, and it really kind of slaps you across the face of what's important. So
yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Again, I think there's a perspective, and if you haven't experienced it yourself, if I think about the working culture that I was in throughout the whole of my corporate, if someone had someone who died in their life, they'd be back at work really quickly, and it's never spoken again after about 2 weeks, and that's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me about your experiences in sort of navigating this, and whether death was, you were able to still speak to it and receive support, or at what points that sort of dropped off or disappeared from conversation.
Our experiences could not have been more
Very different
from like the actual grief process and the work process. Completely opposite experiences.
Yeah. My company at the time was exceptionally understanding. From a work perspective, every time they called, it was legitimately to check in on me and see how I was doing. I wound up taking about a 3-month leave of absence after my mother passed away. In no way did they rush me back to work. They made sure Jessica and I were taken care of. From a professional standpoint, I don't think a company could have performed any better or more admirably to an employee in a situation such as mine. I think they killed it. From a grief perspective, very early on, Jessica looked at me and said, "I'm gonna find you a grief therapist," just because of the circumstances of how close my mother and I were, and the circumstances in which I found her. And I'm forever thankful to her for that, because I needed it. And she just saw immediately that I needed it too. And she reached out to one and found one. And I worked with that therapist regularly for a year to help me process, grief, as you know, is dynamic and it's complex, and it presents itself in ways that you don't even realize that it's grief, right? I mean, there's days you're irritable for no reason, and working with that therapist to really kind of process those feelings, and let me know what to expect and give me tools and methods to kind of help me navigate grief as it presents itself in that swinging pendulum or the waves of the ocean or whatever the metaphor may be. I don't think I'd be who I am today without working with her. Outside of that, just leaning on family and friends. I mean, Jessica was my rock throughout this entire thing, and I don't know how she did it. I needed some stability, some sort of rock, and to this day, I don't know how she did it, but I wouldn't have gotten through it without her either. And just the support of friends and other family. And, someone told me early on in this journey that, like, some people you expect to come through for you are just absolutely not going to. They don't deal with death well. It's not their thing. And then some people you barely know are really, really going to show up. And there were a couple of people in my mom's life, a coworker of hers that would meet me for coffee or lunch every week, and we just share stories. And um, he really really touched my life. But yeah, I mean, it's help of professionals, love of friends and family, and just leaning on the people that are in your life. Life obviously is never the same, but you're not going to get through it without that.
My experience, quite the opposite in all the ways. So, I am not going to name the place that I was working, but I had worked with these people before, and we decided to go ahead and start something new, do something different. And I say that because for me, I was like, if I can trust anybody when it comes to a really dark period of my life, it's these people. I've been with them for a lot of years, and we've been at multiple companies together. And I was sitting in the office when Tripp called me. Hey, something's wrong, and it was pretty immediate. I just told my CEO at the time. I said, I'm out. I'm leaving. I'm going to support my husband. And it's like funny to say this, but one of the first people you usually call or text when somebody passes away is your boss, because you have to let them know, like, hey, I'm not going to be at work. So that's exactly what I did. And within the next 2 days, we got the dinner sent to our house. We got the, so sorry for your lost text from other colleagues. And then it very quickly turned into, within 3 days, like, hey, are you going to be back on next Monday? And that it struck a chord with me. I think what I learned in the process is like people don't always know how to deal with death. And I can never hold them accountable for the way they handled it, because I just don't think that there is enough information or conversations out there on how do you deal with an employee who is going through grief. People don't even realize that, like, grief is this thing that lasts with you forever. Most are like, oh, after the funeral, they're good. And that's not the case. So I was back on within 3 to 4 days, and I don't think we really ever talked about it again. The day of her actual celebration of life, I was getting work calls. People were calling me, even though I had taken PTO. And again, that was my moment to say, like, this isn't it. As much as I did respect those people, it just really struck a chord with me that there's a way to go about this. And, one thing that we really hope to do as the founder and co-founder of the Deadbook is not only just talk about how do you plan for death, but like, let's have a conversation about grief and how to approach that. And, I very quickly learned that a simple check-in, just, for the next year, truly, even 2 years, however long it's needed, like as a manager, just to say, how are you doing? How can I help? Do we need to offload some work? Do you need to push back the timeline on a project? That's it. It's really not that hard. And so for me, I was in a pretty dark space when it came to work, and my grief was showing up as like, I wasn't logging on time. I was irritable. I'm a very outgoing person, but I was very like, just kind of to myself, didn't really talk, didn't want to be a part of conversations. And so that's how grief showed up for work, and just my personal experience with work. And again, I think it's because people just don't have the knowledge of how to handle grieving employees. And bereavement leave is also not required in the US. So that's a whole another conversation. There's some wonderful companies out there that are trying to work with different corporations and companies to make bereavement leave an actual policy. But that's another thing. We just don't know how to handle it. When speaking about grief, Tripp shared his experience that he was very much depressed, couldn't get out of bed, was in therapy. I was booking flights. Like, honestly, I was like, what's the hottest restaurant? We're going. What's this event? We're going. We traveled more than we ever have the year that Susan passed. So, for me, grief showed up in this, like, my mom and sister are both psychologists, and so was one of my good girlfriends. She's a therapist. And I remember sharing this, and they're like, oh, you turned to escapism. You literally just did not want to think about or face what was going on. And, with Tripp being in the state that he was in, you were trying to be the shining light of like, we got to get out, we got to go do stuff, we have to see this place, we have to go to this concert, we have to go to this event. But I think, you know, it helped me because that's exactly what I needed. Was I needed some normalcy in my life, and I needed something that felt very like, okay, like there is still a world out there and things to do and places to see and people to be with. But I now know that's exactly what it is. You know, it's not that I was okay. And I think so many people probably from the outside thought, oh, she's good. You know, like they're already on a plane a month later. It wasn't that. I think that's just how I dealt with it, was burying my actual feelings with these other events or, you know, travel. And I can say now, like, it helped me in the meantime, but the emotions are still there. And I realized, you know, I'm very personal. I like to be alone a lot to deal with my emotions. I don't like to show my emotions. I don't wear them on my sleeve. And so I quickly realized after about, you know, 8 months of being this escape artist, if you will, it was like, okay, Tripp, I just need to go on a walk by myself, or I just need to like be upstairs and do a meditation or whatever it is. And that's what ended up helping me work out a lot of my grief.
And thank you so much for sharing and obviously acknowledging the differences in our experiences. And, you know, Jessica, I'm so sorry that you had that experience. And what really resonated within me and my corporate experience is actually, I sat here thinking, I unfortunately think this is probably kind of the norm in the majority of places. That will be the experience. And I wonder as well how people who've been through loss, both on the emotional, the grieving side, as well as really understanding what it takes then to be an executor, if it is a parent who you've lost or similar, actually, you know, why is it so reliant on personal experience or having compassionate leaders for that to be an experience? Yeah. And actually what really resonated in what you shared as well, I mean, so much resonated from both of your shares, but also, you know, your role, Jessica, in being there to signpost and being able to say, hey, actually, you know, let's think about therapy, you know, consider this could be really, really good for you. And I think in my journey after we lost our daughter, that was as well for me, it was that signposting. I wouldn't be in the therapy that I'm in without, actually, it was the hospital. It was the consultant and the bereavement midwife who both said, I know you say you're fine, but you really do need to consider some form of therapy or counseling. Let's walk this path with you and help to get you to someone who can help you. And I think that's a really beautiful bit of insight for anyone, whether it's a spouse or a friend or another family member, that we can do to actually just signpost and spotlight areas of support for us in this, what is a very long journey of grief. And also, I loved that check-ins that you mentioned, Jessica. And I think that is such gold if you're a manager. And there's so much stuff in my journey that I now call myself out on the manager that I was throughout all of my career, and things that, because I just didn't know, I never thought of. But I think that's really, really profound as well, of that, the long-term check-ins, if it's a year, if it's 2 years, that can really make a difference in someone's life, give them support, but also, I'd imagine, help them to show up as their very best self at work. You know, it's a fulfilling cycle of just helping our teams to really, really thrive. So thank you both so much for sharing that. So much richness that I think we can all take forwards.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. It's so simple. How are you?
So I think that's a really beautiful segue into my last question for you both. And that is, given our death avoidant culture, given that death isn't spoken about, we don't plan for our own deaths, we don't contemplate it. We live in this sort of live forever sort of energy. I say we, I mean sort of the majority.
Sure.
So tell me, what words of wisdom do you have for any of our listeners who are perhaps sat here thinking, okay, this is definitely something I need to do. I don't know how I can take those first steps, dip that toe in to start on this process, both, I suppose, from the practical side, as well as, of course, there's the emotional side of it that I think is really important for us to acknowledge. So I'd love to hear any of your words of wisdom here.
Yeah. So I think I can speak to it from like, how do you actually have the conversations and what do those look like? I am pulling honestly from my family full of psychologists and my friend who's a children's therapist, actually. So there's a few different ways to approach the conversation. When we're talking about like really young kids, I think we hear so often that like grandma passed, it's been 3 days, but I haven't told my kid yet. And I think we need to nip that in the bud, because the sooner you start talking about it in their younger years, the more comfortable they become talking about it in their older years. So really being able to say, hey, your grandma passed today. She's still like here, but she's not physically here. And really being able to show them that this is the cycle of life and this is part of it. And then answering any questions they have. So that's how you kind of start young. I think when we get a little older, if we have yet to talk about it, when we're starting to approach teenage years or even 20s, I think you really start the conversation with like, hey, we've never talked about what happens when I'm gone. Do you have questions for me? Are you scared of death? What scares you? And coming with answers to that. And then I think you can get more into the logistical side of it. So, especially once kids get older or your partner, if you've never had the conversation, it's like they kind of need to understand the logistical side of it as far as like, if something happens to me, what happens immediately next? Remove the actual like will and estate plan from it. It's like, who do I call first, or who comes to get me, or what is that first step? And I think that's really how you start having the conversation. We could probably go on and on about this, but I think those are two really simple ways, is like asking them, one, first, what questions they have about death or what scares them about death, but two, just making it a part of conversation in general, and making sure that people understand, hey, this is part of life and this is our life cycle. I think Tripp can share a little more when it comes to like, how do we approach the conversation of estate planning and the logistics.
Yeah, and we're kind of tackling this separately, but I don't think they're mutually exclusive of each other. I think, in taking this journey, you're acknowledging your own mortality and you're having these conversations. And through doing so, you can better prepare via an administrative standpoint. Because the administrative piece, when you start it, can be intimidating. It's intimidating both from a standpoint of documentation and the things you need to gather, but also through doing that, you're acknowledging your own mortality. You're saying, I'm putting this together because, I'm going to pass. I'm putting this together because at some point in my life, God forbid, I could be incapacitated in a coma, and my family needs to know what to do if I'm in a situation like that, right? And that acknowledgement, again, can be powerful. In doing so, and in starting that administrative journey, it's both empowering, to self via, I feel that I'm protected should anything happen to me and I'm incapacitated. And I know and acknowledge that, when I pass, that my wishes are going to be met. But even through doing so, I know that if I'm in a situation where I'm incapacitated, my family's going to be taken care of. They don't have to make stressful situations on the fly without knowing what my wishes are. They can just look at, everything you've put together and say, okay, we've talked about this before. And I know exactly, they want to do not resuscitate. They do not want to be put on life support, or they do, or whatever it may be, but they're not making those decisions blind in a stressful situation. Moreover, after you pass away, funerals can get expensive quickly. you know that your family is taken care of. They open up your documentation and say, hey, super, I know exactly what they want to do. They want a Viking funeral. We're going to push them out to sea and shoot a flaming arrow at them. Don't do that. It's illegal. And your wishes are going to be met. Family isn't going to be fighting over items, which has happened in Jessica's family. And siblings or family members don't talk for years because there's this strife. Everyone knows what your wishes are, and that you're not going to cause any strife, and that your family's taken care of on the back end. It's going to be intimidating starting that journey. There's a lot of emotional aspects, but there's a lot of guides out there. We have an excellent framework through our experience of, these are places you can start. This is a central location. But just getting started, once you get started, it's like getting that boulder started down the hill, right? You just gotta break past that initial point. And once you get going, it can be kind of fun. Like we said earlier in the conversation, you can have fun with it. You can make it your own. But it's going to be intimidating, but two things to keep in mind. Once you get going, it's going to go. And the peace of mind that you yourself gain and that you gain knowing that you're taking care of your family is going to be exponentially more beneficial to you and exponentially more beneficial in energy than actually getting started and going through the process. It's going to pay dividends for yourself and your loved ones.
I truly imagine this world, and I'm not saying this just because we're the founders of the Deadbook. I truly imagine a world in which people say, my Deadbook is here when you need it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is such an easy way to start the conversation. And if people aren't ready to have the conversation, then it's as simple as, where my Deadbook is.
Yes, I love that. And it makes it, I think there's a real momentum that this process does bring in. But even, for me, having my Deadbook, and I'm soon to start, literally this weekend, going to start going on the process of filling everything out. And it really is a conversation as you flow through it. I was having a flick through it this week, and it's just so beautiful with the prompts and how it just step by step, okay, this is what you need now. And I think that there is a real momentum. That's what I witnessed when I did my end of life doula training. It was as soon as you get started, it's really not that scary. And I think as well, even in the death avoidance, and even with that, if a grandmother passes and it's that thing of, oh no, we can't tell the grandkids, we're trying to protect. But even that was definitely, in my experience when my granddad died, I remember my mum, because I wanted to go sit with his body in his care home. And literally mum was, oh God, no, the body's gone, no. But I could tell she was also protecting. She's like, no.
Right.
No, you can't. You couldn't. I know you spent a lot of time with him, in his final year, but you couldn't, see his dead body. And actually, I think, that's an avoidance that in my experience, and in my experience with my daughter and everything, as soon as you kind of just push past, you realize it's really not. And it is, you mentioned it, Jessica, it's a natural part of life. Mm-hmm. As soon as we reconnect us into that life cycle, we realize this is something that we would have witnessed, happening in our homes literally a century ago. Yep. It's just that it's been pushed behind closed doors, and in that it's just created that separation from us. However, that's why I am so excited to go on this journey with my Deadbook, because I do, and it looks beautiful as well. I'm a sucker for something that looks really cool. It looks really cool. So it's something that I'm going to be really proud to tell my children and say, this is where the Deadbook is for me and your dad. Make sure you can go find it. And I think that, I'm really, really excited to go on this journey, because actually I do see this as a real gift. For me, that is the power of this. I think it's the greatest gift that we can give after we've gone, is all of this information. Because we, in much as in life, we want to make things easy for our loved ones. exactly the same in death. So I am so grateful to you both. And with Death on the Daily, we acknowledge the impermanence of everything, and within that also is the impermanence of this conversation. Now, I mean, I say this in every single conversation, and I legitimately mean it. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. And I mean, we chatted on earlier in the week, and we did nearly talk for hours and hours and hours. But it's time to bring our conversation to its closing, to its end. Before we do, though, I wanted to give some space for you to share any final words with our listeners, including more about the Deadbook and how our listeners can find out about you and perhaps get their hands on their own Deadbook.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. So, first, I just want to thank everybody for listening. I think conversations like these are the ones that are going to start making waves when it comes to talking about death and estate planning and what happens in the afterlife. So, thank you for having us on. It truly means a lot to be a part of this community, industry, whatever we want to call it, and really be making a difference, hopefully, in people's lives who are listening. So we are the Deadbook, and our mission is really to talk about death. As much as we have this product that helps people when it comes to estate planning, it acts as a central storage location for all the things that somebody would need. I do want to share, we are not providing legal advice. We do not replace a will or a trust. That is something that you include within the Deadbook, but we are not legal advice. We are a central storage location for everything your loved ones will need once you pass. You can find us at thedeadbook.co, or you can follow us on TikTok and Instagram at thedeadbook.co. We really, really are on a mission to bring conversations to light when it comes to death. What are other people's experiences with death? How do you plan for it? How do you begin to talk about it? And that's what we're doing on our social channels currently. It's really just having a conversation about what death means to us, our society, other people. So you can follow along there. And then we now ship to the UK, we ship to Canada, we ship in the US, and we ship to Spain. And I have set up a 15% off discount code just for anybody who's listening. So you can use Death Daily 15 at checkout for 15% off your Deadbook purchase.
It's important to note that in the Deadbook, we also provide prompts for the storage of important information like assets and liabilities and passwords. Not just a central storage location for documents. Final words: if you're experiencing grief, do what you need to do to navigate that grief. The 5 steps of grief are not real, and they present themselves in all sorts of different formats and combinations and when you least expect it, and they affect your body in very weird ways. So do what you need to do, go down by the river and yell as loud as you need to. It's okay. Just don't hurt yourself or others. And final words are: humanity has a 100% mortality rate. We are all going to die at some point. And the more you talk about it and the more you prepare yourself and your family, the better off we will all be. And Tanya, thank you for having us, and thank you for taking part on this incredible mission that you're on. We really appreciate both being on and chatting with you and being a part of your mission.
Tripp and Jessica, thank you so much. I was one of those since you announced recently UK shipping. I was in there. I think it was day one. I was literally like, well, probably one of your first orders was like, bang, there it is. But thank you so much. And I mean, for everything that you do in your mission and the conversations and the planning that you're inspiring. So I'm so grateful to you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank
Likewise,
you.
We appreciate it.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really, really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire. And there's something inside, and we'll never make it, and we'll never break.